What possibility existed for a woman in a naval courtroom when the laws themselves were drafted by men who considered female piracy to be unnatural? History chillingly demonstrates that the answer was almost none. Captured women pirates rarely received clemency. During the 17th and 18th centuries, often termed the Golden Age of Piracy, British admiral courts showed minimal tolerance for piracy of any type. However, female defendants were viewed as transgressing societal norms twice over. They had violated the law of the empire and also gender expectations deeply ingrained in the social structure. Trials occurred in temporary naval tribunals, frequently established in colonies such as New Providence or Jamaica. These courts functioned without a jury, and the verdicts were generally decided beforehand. The judicial process was quick, yet included dramatic elements. Evidence was collected from naval officers, ship captains, and occasionally terrified sailors worried about their own connection to piracy. The accused possessed limited legal rights. Anne Bonny and Mary Read, who were two of the most infamous female pirates historically, faced trial in Spanish Town, Jamaica, in 1720. Based on the formal court record, when Bonny received her death sentence, she responded acidly to her lover, Calico Jack, saying, "If you had fought like a man, you need not have been hanged like a dog." They used the defense of pregnancy, known as pleading the belly. This was among the few legal safeguards provided to women. In the situation of Bonny and Read, this strategy succeeded temporarily. Nevertheless, most female pirates were not as fortunate. Many faced their death sentences in silence, aware that the court had already determined their guilt long before they uttered a word. Hanged for piracy at execution dock, the river flowed silently, quickly encompassing, but the sound of the spectators ruined the morning tranquility. Here, at London's notorious execution dock, countless pirates, both women and men, met their demise, swinging from the gallows just above the murky water of the Thames. It was at this location that the British Empire created a horrific warning against piracy, and female pirates, despite being uncommon, were no exception. Piracy was designated a capital offense under British maritime law. The Piracy Act of 1698, enacted during the reign of King William III, explicitly stated that all and every person so offending shall suffer pains of death. Unlike executions on land, these hangings were conducted by the Admiralty, and the specific site, execution dock, functioned as a symbolic location. Pirates would die along with the receding tide that had previously symbolized their liberty. Women found guilty of piratical acts were condemned with the same finality as men. The executions involved a brutal procedure. The condemned individuals were escorted from Newgate Prison, paraded through London in a vehicle under armed escort, and mocked by gathered crowds. Upon reaching Wapping, they were compelled to stand beneath the gallows, occasionally with the noose already fastened around their necks. They were not dropped with a long fall, designed to guarantee a rapid death. Instead, the use of the short drop technique resulted in drawn-out strangulation, a practice referred to as the marshal's dance, as the body would spasm horribly before becoming still. Even though executions of female pirates were less frequent, they were equally savage. Mary Critette, an American woman who joined a crew composed of escaped convicts who became pirates in 1729, was apprehended near Virginia and brought to trial in Williamsburg. After being convicted of piracy, she was condemned to death and executed promptly and without ceremony. No appeals based on pregnancy saved her. The objective of these public executions was not solely punishment, but intimidation. The remains of the most severe offenders were left hanging until 3 tides had flowed over them. This punishment was known as gibbeting. Although this was more typical for male pirates, the mere possibility served as a warning to everyone. Piracy would not be pardoned, regardless of one's sex. In the sight of the gallows, female pirates transitioned from mythical figures to cautionary tales, examples sacrificed to uphold imperial power and societal structure. They were also flogged publicly in front of spectators. Prior to execution by hanging, many female pirates experienced the whip, flogging, a torturous and ancient form of punishment, was frequently utilized by colonial governors and naval authorities to impose public degradation and physical suffering upon captured pirates. For women, this penalty included an extra layer of display. Their bodies were transformed into instruments of warning, and the onlookers were expected to learn through witnessing their agony. Flogging was typically carried out using the cat-o'-nine-tails, which was a harsh whip made of knotted cords capable of tearing the flesh with every blow. Sentences could range from 12 lashings to over 100, depending on the seriousness of the crime and the tribunal's judgment. The punishment occurred publicly, often on the docks or outside the entrances of prisons where residents, including children and women, would assemble to observe the spectacle. Following their capture by Jamaican authorities in 1720, Anne Bonny and Mary Red were reportedly confined in poor conditions and subjected to harsh treatment even before their court appearance. While there is no direct documentation of flogging being inflicted upon them during their detention, female pirates captured off the coast of the American colonies or the West Indies, among other colonies, were habitually flogged as part of their conviction or to compel them to confess. For naval authorities, the public whipping of female pirates achieved two aims: degradation and deterrence. Women who had the audacity to fight or lead on ships were humiliated before the public eye, their blood mixing with the salty air and the cobblestones. These punishments were not merely about achieving justice, they were fundamentally about exerting control. The theatrical display of pain ensured that the message extended far beyond the location of the gallows, forcing them into slavery or concubinage. Not every female pirate who was captured was taken to the gallows. In certain instances, especially within colonial ports in the Americas, West Africa, and the Caribbean, women were not executed. Instead, they were compelled into lives of coerced labor, concubinage, or slavery. Nevertheless, specific documentation of this fate for female pirates is sparse. Historians recognize that although piracy was predominantly male, women involved in piratical activities could face diverse outcomes determined by their nationality, class, race, and the decisions of colonial administrators. In the Portuguese and Spanish colonies, where the definitions between privateering, slavery, and piracy were often unclear, women seized aboard pirate vessels, particularly those of indigenous or African descent, were sometimes sold into servitude irrespective of whether they were captives or crew members. Archived documents from Cartagena and Portobello in the late 17th century describe women taken from captured pirate ships and processed as wartime spoils. Furthermore, women of mixed race and black women found on ships were frequently presumed to be enslaved. In these situations, they were assimilated into plantation economies or kept as domestic staff and concubines by merchants or colonial officials. The records seldom differentiate between other women discovered on captured ships and female pirates, which complicates drawing clear distinctions. However, the use of forced servitude was widespread. What is known is that for many women, being captured did not result in a swift execution. It signified disappearing into plantations, households, or ships' holds, where they were deprived of recognition, identity, and history. This was a silent erasure, documented not by formal verdicts but by silence, left to perish on prison ships. For a subset of captured female pirates, death was not instantaneous at the gallows. It arrived slowly, silently, and hidden from view aboard the decaying hulls of prison ships. These floating jails, anchored near British harbors or colonial coasts, were never intended for long-term human detention. Despite this, they served as holding facilities for rebels, pirates, and individuals deemed adversaries of the crown, occasionally including women. While specific records detailing female pirates dying aboard prison ships are limited, the wider context is undeniable. Captured women were frequently confined under the same barbaric conditions as the men. In the 18th century, as the population of prisoners increased and land-based prisons reached capacity, colonial authorities and the British Navy utilized decommissioned warships. These vessels, stripped of their sails and left to decay in harbors, were moored in locations such as Kingston, Jamaica, Plymouth, and Portsmouth. Life aboard these ships was appalling. Prisoners were restrained below deck in cramped, dark, and airless compartments. Sickness, notably smallpox, dysentery, and typhus, spread rapidly. Food was inadequate and often rotten. Women on these vessels faced double vulnerability. Besides starvation and disease, many suffered severe maltreatment and exploitation, including various forms of abuse inflicted by sailors or guards, though this was seldom formally documented. Lacking both recognition and legal rights, they were often excluded entirely from official records. On these quiet decks, history recorded not formal executions, it recorded absence. And in that lack of documentation, the destiny of numerous female pirates was permanently sealed. They were forgotten, not unintentionally, but by deliberate design. Their penalties were more than mere sentences. They functioned as mechanisms of imperial control, gendered power, and inducing fear. The fate experienced by female pirates demonstrated the profound extent to which the maritime community feared women who dared to challenge it. These accounts continue to resonate in the quietness of prison ships and the gloom of gallows. What does their omission from historical records reveal regarding justice, power, and whose memory is preserved? You may comment below. As the ancient Roman historian Tacitus observed, the more corrupt the state, the more numerous the laws.